So we are live both in Facebook and we are live here. So let me open up our window. Thank you so much for joining us. The VOR webinar series is a weekly series with themed topics. And this week we are talking about careers. And we have with us is Adriana Soundara. Thank you for joining us, Adriana.
Thank you for having me.
So, there's a lot of interest for people, whether or not they are employed currently, they've been laid off, or they're looking at what that landscape looks like for them. And there's some hesitation. And I think I particularly wanted to talk with you to talk with you about what tools people should have in place, some recruiting tips that you can offer, and some ideas on how we can prepare for our next level in our careers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's just jump right in. Let's talk about, what does success look like for you? And then we're going to switch it up to careers.
Okay. All right, great. So success, to me, I come from my family's very into sports. And a lot of that rings true in my professional life as well. So success to me is not whether you win or lose the game. It's how you play during the game. Are you assisting your teammates? Were you there when you needed to be there? How do you feel when you walk off either the court or the field? Did you leave everything out there? Did you do everything you could possibly do? Right? And if you feel good about what you did, and if you feel like you helped the greater good or the team, then I think that's a success. It doesn't have to mean points on a board. It doesn't have to mean, in my field, ideally, yes, we want to fill that position. We want to fill that role. But if we established relationships throughout the process, and if we developed long-term relationships that will foster opportunity for the company longer term, that in itself is a success. So success to me is not defined by an ultimate win or loss or necessarily positive outcome, but it's the cycle of that process and what you contributed, and that you feel good that you did everything you could do throughout that process.
So let's talk about everything you can do in the process. And right now we're looking at, again, the landscape has changed. We are sitting back and thinking, we're reflecting on whether or not our current job or what we did still serves us. So we are now engaged in a new normal. If I'm looking for a job, if I'm considering a new career, give me some ideas on what I should be doing right now.
Absolutely. I think it's all about preparation. I think it's about taking the opportunity to look back at your toolkit. We do things throughout our day-to-day in our work lives. We complete projects, we do take on different initiatives, and we don't realize necessarily all of the skills that go into what we're doing on a day-to-day. And if you sit back and actually just take an inventory of what you've done over your career, your accomplishments, what you've worked on, what you're truly passionate about, that may have shifted, and you may realize that you're actually good in an area, or you're good at something that you never really thought of or came to mind because you never really took the step back to reassess. So I think the first thing you have to do is, by preparation, I mean reassess yourself, reassess your, look back at your career, look back at your accomplishments, look back at, really what you have in the toolkit and what you can build upon. Right now, I think it's a great opportunity for folks to start building upon what they have already established within their careers, or something new. It's not necessarily, and just because we're in this environment, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't learn a new skill or take on a new opportunity. So that's extremely important.
So, Adriana, let me ask you this though. I am, and I'm just saying I as a general term, I am thinking that it's really hard for me to, and maybe it's cultural upbringing, to be praising my accolades, if you will. I have a hard time when you're talking about taking stock of your accomplishments. I cringe a little bit inside thinking about that, because it's really hard for me to put on paper what my accomplishments are. Yet other people feel so comfortable doing that. How can I move away from that? Or do I need to get somebody to help me with the process?
Exactly. And that's true. It doesn't come naturally. And sometimes it's not a very formal process that you have for yourself. Sometimes it's just a mental, kind of check-in that you have, right? Where am I? What have I done? Where do I want to be? But it doesn't come naturally. You're absolutely correct. And I think that's where the other piece of this comes in, where I think it's a huge opportunity right now for networking to take place, for you to reach out to people that perhaps you've lost touch with, that maybe were mentors or seek a mentor. I think mentorship is huge as it relates to preparation and as it relates to just overall, whether you're looking for a new role or whether you're just exploring and making a change. It's amazing what you'll learn when you actually have dialogue with people that you've partnered with and worked with and consider to be mentors or just very close colleagues. You learn a lot about yourself from other people as well. And it's not, again, it's not an easy thing to do, but I think in this current state that we're in, it's more acceptable. More and more people are open to having these kind of conversations on LinkedIn. Many of you may have experienced, if you reach out to someone, they're more apt to reply. They're more apt to just have a conversation to have a conversation. There doesn't have to be an objective. There doesn't have to be, a reason or a sell behind it. It could simply be just to connect. So I say, when you do that, look back on yourself, right? Do that look back and really understand yourself. Think about the people that have really influenced you. Think about the people that can help you as well throughout that. And it'll make things a little easier. But I think it is, and it's not so much accomplishments, but I think that's important. But it's also, I worked on this project as an example, and I didn't realize that I'm actually a good project manager. I actually, was able to put together a great plan, and I enjoyed it. So maybe that's something that, although I'm not a project manager in my existing role, maybe it's something I can explore. And how do I do that, right? Again, who do I network with? What organizations are out there that are potential, avenues for me to just join and learn? So learning is key. Just taking that reflection, doing that look back on yourself is extremely important. I feel I actually did it myself, over the last week or two, when I learned about myself, and I recruit for a living. That's what I do. I assess talent, I assess skill sets, but you have to take a moment to stop and really, really think about what your skills and your attributes are, and they continuously grow and change. So as recruiters, I think we used to say, always keep your resume updated, always keep your resume updated. That was like a key to any recruiter in terms of someone that was seeking assistance. Now it goes beyond that. It's beyond the resume, right? It's really taking an inventory and knowing what you're passionate about, understanding what you've done that you may not have realized that you did well and that you may like to do going forward.
So two things come up as you're talking. One of them is, as I think about LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is something that I've used, a tool I've used for many years, and I have leveraged it. I continually go on. I spend at least 2 hours on LinkedIn a day, uh, part of my business as well as for my professional development. But one of the things that I'm aware of regarding networking, because again, you're networking in a new way. You're not saying, hey, let's meet for some cafe, but more you're saying, hey, can we meet on Zoom, or do you have a few minutes, can we chat? But it's really different for you or for anyone to reach out to someone they haven't talked to in years and say, hey, I want something from you, right? So I feel like it's a 2 or 3 step process. You have to reach out and say, hey, how are you? What's going on in your side of the woods, or whatever the conversation is. That's the way I happen to talk. The way I write is the way I talk. I say hey all the time. But I don't feel comfortable when people approach me with an ask right away. It makes me uncomfortable.
Right. Right. No, and you're absolutely right. And I think that's in terms of qualities that you as a candidate, say you're the candidate, you're out seeking a job, you're trying to develop networks and so forth. One of the qualities is understanding how to build a relationship, how to establish that rapport. As an example, you and I have been in the same circles for many years when you look back, not directly linked to each other or having a ton of conversation, but I saw the opportunity in terms of networking with you for just another purpose and helping, and out of that you know things grow. So I think it's going into it with a very open mind and understanding your audience. So when you're reaching out to someone, you truly have to understand, obviously, your purpose. There will be a purpose. Know who they are. Do your research. Research is important, right? Who are they connected to? Where have they worked? Are there things that you have in common with them? And those are tools that you can use, because when you reach out to someone, you can easily reference, we've not, if it's someone you've worked with before, I've not directly worked with you, but hey, we have this person in common, I'd really love to connect with you. So you're not asking them for anything necessarily. It's just you're being your relationship builder in that point in time, and the person on the receiving end doesn't see it as you asking them, I want to sit down and talk to you about my career. Very bluntly, they're seeing it as, oh, this person wants to talk, oh, they know so and so I used to work with, why not? And I think right now it's the perfect opportunity, and as you said, to have those coffee chats. And it's hard because it's not sitting down and actually having a coffee and being physically in the same space with the person. I think it's still possible though, and we just have to get used to this means of doing it, and comfortable with the camera and comfortable with the setup, and once that's there, it should be an easy flowing conversation. Don't you shouldn't stress out so much about it and have an agenda per se, but have your research done, understand your audience.
No, sorry. I'm thinking there's two things, right? One, we're often in a place where it's either we have the time to be able to, massage the relationship and cultivate it and do all the due diligence that you can. However, oftentimes you're not in that place. You lost your job yesterday. You're concerned you need to get a job ASAP. So you don't have the time to be able to do all that work. And I know it is work and you have to do some, but are there any shortcuts that you think would work? I know that's a terrible thing to ask, but we're in different situations, right? So things have, the timelines have shrunk a bit.
They have. And I think, when it comes to looking for a job and being active on the market, there is a lot of long-term preparation that goes into that. So I would say if you've not done that already, it's okay. You can pick up, right, and go from there. But that's something you build longer term. Now, if you're stuck in a situation where, as you said, things are happening very quickly and you're just maybe surprised, not prepared, I take inventory and do the same approach. So you can send out, for as an example, 100 resumes, and that's great. But on top of doing that, find out where you're sending them, do your research, who's at those companies. LinkedIn is fantastic because it tells you exactly who's at those companies that may be in common with you. A really light note to say, I'm really interested in your firm. We've had this, connection. I just wanted to bring that to light. Anything you do to help. I mean, it's well received. I think there's a fear that individuals feel that the other person on the other side might receive it in a ill manner, or, oh, they're bothering me for something, or they feel, more introverted, not more, they need to kind of come out a little bit more of their shell. But if you see it as just a light touch, it makes it a lot easier. So you do have to, I feel, even if you haven't done the preparation up front and kind of maintained your relationships, it's an opportunity for you to start to maintain those relationships and know how important they are as you move forward. So postings are fine, but it's very competitive. So you want your resume. You can have the best resume in the world. Yes, it will get, someone's attention, but at the same time, what if there's another 10 or 20 right behind that. You want to stick out, and the way that you stick out is, it is networking. That's been my golden rule for my entire career. And you can take different approaches to networking. I mean, it's a vast topic, and it's fascinating, and the benefits you reap from it from a personal and professional way are really phenomenal. But I think that you need to think of ways that are going to make your profile rise to the top, right?
Right. Plus, I think the other thing that comes up for me as we're talking is, you may be an executive in your current role, but after spending so much time at home, working from home, maybe that no longer serves you. You don't want to be an executive anymore. Maybe you want to work and do something that maybe a step down in terms of title, but the type of work that you're doing resonates more for you now. What advice would you give folks that are in that particular space?
Yeah, and that actually happens pretty frequently. Or people that are shifting careers too. So they're either looking to, not stay within the same level that they're in and take a different, path within their, desired industry or career path, or they're looking to make a complete change. And that's okay. And I think for me, if me personally, right, I made a switch from financial services after being in financial services for a very long time to academia. That was pretty night and day. So it was a change in industry. It was a change in not career per se, but overall, it was a big shift in terms of the path that I was taking. What I found helpful, and this is why I always go back to that, my golden rule is, okay, who do I know in academia? Right? Is there anybody, or are there any resources available to me, or any groups, any affiliations? Do your research. That's so critical and so key and so important. I can't emphasize it enough, because it just helps you. It helps you in a way that you'd be, surprised. So networking, again, I go back to that, because that's kind of been a crutch as well, because people help people. It's just human nature. And in that particular example, I didn't know anybody that worked, in academia, but I knew somebody that worked in academia, and sparked a conversation. And then from there, there was a flow that kind of transpired in terms of introductions and, things that happened. So same with the level piece. If you have an opportunity to explain why you're looking for that particular change. And as you said, maybe you're an executive, and whoever's on the receiving end of that, profile or resume, sees a disconnect. If there's an opportunity or an explanation that comes with that, then it makes it easier. It makes it easier. And companies are open to having those conversations.
But companies, I feel like there's the gatekeepers, right? Of course. And as a recruiter, there's people that you want to see come through. Walk me through some of the things that you look for when you're looking at resumes, when you're looking at people that are coming in. Give me some ideas of what you're looking for.
So I think first is there has to be some relevancy to the role and the candidate and the resume. So there has to be something that is relevant to the roles and responsibilities of that position and what the person, that's applying brings to the table. So that's important. It's also consistency. How long has this person been in their career? What's their tenure? What have they done? And it's not only the tenure, the amount of time they spent in their career or in a particular job, but it's how did they grow? Were they away with this company for, say, 10 years? And those 10 years, were they in the same role? Or did they take on different positions? Did they take on different assignments, different opportunities? Were they promoted or not? All these different factors kind of go into that, because then you can see the growth of the individual, the person's desire to learn, and their proactiveness actually, can easily be kind of derived from that as well. So that's important, as well as, you do look at things in terms of, people do still list their interests and their professional associations and so forth. And sometimes you gain a better understanding of the individual through that.
You recommend that? that there's
Um,
this interest. So walk me through resumes. I want to know your CV. I want to know so many things. And please, if you have questions, I know we have quite a few people on, but if
yeah.
you have questions, now's the time to pose them. I may just poll people and ask them what type of questions, whether or not what they want, what type of advice they're looking for. So I just put a poll out there to see whether or not folks are looking for resume tips, interview tips, job trends, and that sort of great stuff. And it looks like what I'm seeing is people want to know what new job trends there are, as well as what the career landscape looks like.
Okay. So as far as trends, so things are changing almost daily, obviously, I think, as we know, and there's companies are adjusting. They're acclimating to the new environment. We see a lot of virtual interviewing. We see companies that are coming out with actual virtual tours of their offices and their facilities so they can show that candidate as they're having this virtual conversation what the actual office looks like. I think that's still important. So they're still showing the cultural piece. So I think personally, although we have gone to this virtual model right now and we don't know how long we'll be in it, there's still a very strong cultural component that companies want to put out there and want to continue to show candidates that they bring to the table, right? Because that's important. It's the job, it's the culture, the environment, all of these things that, you know, make a perfect match between a candidate and a company. So I think the virtual piece is definitely something we're seeing, and it's a trend. And I've heard, I mean, we've seen on the news as well. I think, you know, with the larger companies too. I mean, Google throughout the rest of the year is going to be off-site, so they're going to do a lot of remote. Goldman Sachs today announced they're still going to be onboarding over 1,600 people virtually, right, and staggered over time. So companies are developing ways and processes where we can integrate new talent virtually. That means something very different though for the candidate as well, as you're interviewing and you're applying for positions, and it becomes a lot more important to you're interviewing virtually. It's different. You don't have an opportunity to go into the office and to, you know, really make that
You have
connection.
to prepare differently.
Prepare differently.
Set
Exactly.
up your space. You know, I spent a lot of time setting up my space when I do the Zoom meetings. I didn't want a virtual background.
Right.
So those are some tips. Before you go on any further, and I've been hearing this quite a bit from the folks that I've interviewed to be on the show this week. So I interviewed them first to make sure that they were the right fit for this week. One of the themes that came up is that companies are starting to only consider people that are in the same space that they're in. So meaning that if your job title was recruiter, that's what they want to see is recruiters. They don't have the bandwidth to train or onboard someone with a different title. What are you thinking in regards to that? Do you agree with that?
I um I can see how it might be happening, but I think it's coming from a different place. I think in currently companies are in a state where they are themselves doing an evaluation of their organizations. Budgets are being reviewed, internal teams are being assessed in terms of where, you know, they will be reorganized within the firm. So there's so much that companies are doing internally right now, just in terms of their own organization and reassessing, assessing, or positioning themselves to, you know, get through this phase that we're going through. That I think it does impact hiring in a sense where we're not hiring in the same way that we were hiring a couple of months ago, where we were, you know, perhaps had a host of different type of positions that were open and different, you know, flexibility there. Perhaps it's come down to these are critical positions that we need onboarded right now. These are critical positions we need to fill within this time frame, and because of that, perhaps it's limiting or inhibiting that flexibility we've seen in the past. But I think it's very cyclical, and I think that as we go through this pandemic and the cycles of the pandemic kind of go up and down. And as companies start to perhaps settle a little bit more, those practices will start to come back as well. I think we'll see it even out. I think hiring is in a unique situation, obviously, in the firms across industries. It's not industry specific. I think every industry is going through it. And I think hiring has had to acclimate as well. And I think it's a result of that. But I think that flexibility will come back. I think openness and diversity of jobs will come back. It's just a matter of time.
Well, that's certainly good to hear. Before we answer the question, I wanted to just allow you to give a couple of tips in regards to resumes, as that was one of the requests from the poll.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a million things out there on resumes. How many pages it should be? Should it be long? Should it be short? What should you have? I've always stuck to, and from a personal perspective and also as a recruiter, what I stick to is whatever you do, ensure that it's clear and it is consistent and it tells your story. You want to read your resume and know exactly, as you're reading it, what you do, what you've accomplished, and where you'd like to go, right? Why you're applying for this position. Those connections need to be there for it to make sense, because if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not going to make sense to somebody else who's reading it. So I'm not a fan of resumes that are 5, 6, 7 pages long, to be honest with you. I think it can be consolidated in a way where you have enough information in 1 or 2 pages to truly demonstrate your skills, your experience, and also where where you're looking to go, your goals. So the length, I would keep it, I'm not one of those people that says, well, if it's over 2 pages and it's just too much. But as long as what you have makes sense and is consistent, I would make it simple and easy. I don't overcomplicate resumes. I don't put a ton of stuff on them. When I read them, I like to read them and immediately say, oh yeah, I see why this makes sense. Oh, look, this person did this, and see how it relates to the responsibilities of the role that you're applying for.
So we have 2 questions before, and I know we only have three minutes left on our time. The first one is on deciding the magnitude of change career-wise. Is it fair to say switching career paths once or twice in your lifetime is fine, but you can't keep doing it every 2 to 3 years? Determining your personal as well as professional short and long-term goals and switching careers accordingly is the right way to do it? Question mark.
Well, I think that rings true also to whether or not you may be switching a career, you may not be switching a career, but you have to have established yourself for a good amount of time before you make a change. You want it to
be a good amount of time.
A good amount of time, when it varies. 2 to 3 years. You don't want a job, to come off as a job hopper. And same thing with the career. So 2 to 3 years, I would say you don't want to be switching your career every 2 to 3 years. But if you have a change in your career within a 2 to 3 year time frame and it happens and you just, go from there, you want to make sure that at least in the next change you make, you're there, for a good number of years. You don't want to immediately shift back off to something different. And also, I don't anticipate that people would have 2, 3, 4 career changes within their, their career path. It's more common, and what I've seen is usually there's 1 or 2 switches that folks have made, and then in the last switch that they make, that's where their tenure tends to be lengthier, right? So that's where we see that people are there for 4 or 5 years, sometimes more, and it depends on the industry. I mean, if you're a technologist and you're looking to stay within technology, but you want to change industries and you're staying within technology every 2 to 3 years, makes sense, because that's kind of comes with that territory, that comes with that particular profession, and that would make sense. But if you were going from being a technologist to being a a florist, and then from being a florist to then being a, kind of a insurance broker or something, then it kind of forms a little bit of a disconnect. And then you may kind of raise a red flag to that recruiter, because they may think, well, do they really want this job? Is it something they're really interested in? Because they've made so many switches. So you want to kind of limit that, if you can, to no more than 1 or 2, if you have to do it or feel the desire to.
So we're actually out of time. However, I do want to answer these last two questions, and then we'll close it off. Most recruiters and hiring managers are only interested in hiring people who have done the same type of work in the same industry and tend to pigeonhole people. There seems to be no room for flexibility to hiring a person with a great resume in a different industry and a job title in which the person has been able to pivot and grow as an individual. Do you agree with that? And again, we have one more question, so if you can make it.
Sure. I would say that it happens. So I agree to it to an extent, but I think that there are some very good hiring managers and very good recruiters out there that can see past that. So
Do you
that's,
find that?
yeah, that speaks to the culture of the company too, I believe. So
Okay, the last question is, what are your thoughts about taking a step back in a position because of financial reasons due to the pandemic? Taking
you
a
know,
step back. What does that mean exactly, Tia? Give me one, sorry, just one little second. Tia is online because I think that we had talked about it a little bit. Maybe you don't want to be an executive anymore and you want to go back, or not go back, but shift. And is that what you're asking, Tia? And if you don't mind, I'm just gonna bring her on. Tia, I hope you don't mind that I'm singling you out and I'm allowing you to talk. Tia, you there? Unmute.
Oh, can you hear me?
Now we can. Hello,
All
Tia.
right.
How are you?
I'm well, Fina. How are you?
I'm doing well. So nice to see you on the webinar. Um, just trying to get a feel for your question.
Sure.
Can you just walk us through it?
Absolutely. I recently have been in conversations with a number of individuals who are in transition, many of them in senior roles, senior managers, director level roles. And as a result, with everything that's happened during the course of the pandemic, they are looking at opportunities, but they may not be considered for those opportunities. And due to financial concerns, paying mortgages and what have you, they are thinking, I may need to take a step back in my role. And if I take a position that is deemed lower, if you will, air quotes, than the position that I am in, how is that being perceived? Am I going to be considered for that role? And if so, once things go back to whatever the new norm will be, and I look for my next position, will that be questioned?
I understand your question. And I think so. There's always, and whether or not there is a pandemic or not, and again, I refer to kind of my personal experience, you can take a step back to take a step forward, for lack of a better term. In this case, you can take a step back to, because you have no choice. Quite honestly, there may be no positions out there that, are at the level that you are at. But I don't believe that if you take a step back, it's going to be difficult to then go back to the norm once opportunities open up, because it goes back to that individual. It goes back to the preparation that we talked about earlier. So if you're continuously being prepared, if you're continuously having conversations, networking, keeping yourself relevant and open, and keeping your toolkit up to date, then it becomes easier when you're ready to make the transition and the market opens up and there are positions that are your level that you can transition to. So in short, I made a transition at the very beginning of my career, and I took a step back to take a step forward, and that didn't inhibit me. And again, it's about the preparation. It's about not settling or being complacent once you're in that role, and understanding that you have a goal going forward and how you can continually stay prepared for when the opportunity does present itself.
Adriana, let me ask you this. If an individual, so you have your resume as an executive, because I think that's what we are hearing, and you want to take a position doing something else, you might want to leave some of the things out of your resume. What do you think about that? Do you need to rewrite your resume to attract that position? Because
Right.
I think you said that before, you want to write your resume to the position.
You
So
do.
that means your toolkit now needs to be a little different. And you're showing up as that person that who's applying for that job. Now,
Right. You do, exactly. I see your point. And you do want to make yourself relevant. You do have to change, right? You do have to kind of change your approach. But that doesn't mean you have to completely reinvent your background nor
right.
take away your accolades or accomplishments. So when you do decide that you're ready to move forward or there is the proper opportunity, it's an easy story to tell. Always look at it as a story. Well, I did make this transition because of X, Y, and Z, but it's still very obvious in terms of prior to that the relevancy it has now to that new role. So you do have to adjust your resume to meet your
And
own.
adjust your ego too. I feel like
There's a lot of personal, right? There
yeah.
is some personal, you have to be okay personally, right? You have to be okay within yourself knowing what you're doing. But I would say to that, it doesn't matter as a leader, it doesn't matter whether you have a team, whether you don't have a team, you can still be a leader wherever you are. You can still use those skills. You can still hone into that and feel a sense of accomplishment for yourself and feel good about yourself, even if the title isn't there. Because at the end of the day, it's just a title, right? And I think it comes down to just being okay with yourself personally with that. But is there ways to get around it? And is there a roadblock if you do it? I don't believe that. I think that you can continue to progress within your career and overcome those obstacles, especially in this current pandemic, right? I mean, and more so because it's completely now understandable, and there's probably going to be a lot of people that are taking the same approach.
Well, Adriana, thank you so much for joining us at the Roar webinar series. All week, we're talking about careers. So please join us tomorrow. We'll be posting the folks that will be on LinkedIn as well as Facebook. So we look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you again. And I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.